I'm Karen, a 37-year-old childless working housewife. Today marks our 5th wedding anniversary, and it also happens to be my husband James's birthday, who is the same age as me. James is a handsome salesman at a well-known company, apparently quite successful, but this means he often has to work overtime and attend business dinners, which has led to us not spending much time together. We had a simple weekday wedding attended by a few family members and friends due to our busy schedules and my weekend work, as per James's strong desire. So for our anniversary and his birthday, I asked him to come home early, and I took a half day off work. I bought his favorite Wagyu steak, wine, cake, and such from the department store's food market and set the table stylishly at home. I was waiting for James to come home. Despite my insistence, he didn't come home. I received a single email saying an emergency came up at work and he had to stay at the office overnight. I was disappointed, but if it's work, it can't be helped. However, I felt a bit doubtful since he said he wasn't that busy with work lately. I cleaned up the meal and went to bed. The next morning, I went to work as usual, texted him, but got no read confirmation. Calls went unanswered as well. Worried, I called his company and was shocked to learn that James had resigned the day before yesterday and was apparently set to start at a company in the neighboring state. He hadn't mentioned a word about this to me. I rushed back home and saw his shoes at the entrance. Bursting into his room, I found him packing his belongings into a suitcase. What's going on? In utter shock, my eyes widened as I asked him. What, you found out already, he said with a click of his tongue, handing me the divorce papers. What do you mean? I repeated the question in dismay, and with a cold look, James said, let's get divorced. What? Why? I'm just sick of it, sick of you not fulfilling your role as a wife. You prioritize work, never cook, laundry once a week, and a dusty house. I don't need a wife like that. Wait a minute. For the past 2 years, I've been making dinner and waiting for you, but you always said you had already eaten out. That's why I stopped cooking. Still, a wife is supposed to cook and wait. Besides, I started eating out because your cooking is awful. He used to say my cooking was the best when we first got married. Shivering at his cold voice, I argued that when we got married, we agreed that I would do laundry and cleaning on my Wednesdays and Thursdays off, but he retorted, so what, I should just put up with a dirty house from Friday to Tuesday? That's a joke. What happened to you all of a sudden? I never thought you'd still be working after 5 years of marriage. When I got the offer to be poached, I thought it was a good chance. A good chance for what? For a divorce? Until now, James had never complained about my job or the housework, and there was never any sign of him wanting a divorce. See, you never realized how unsatisfied I've been. I don't need a wife like that. I've rented an apartment near my new job, so I'm not coming back here. With that said, James pushed past me as I stood in front of the door, grabbed his suitcase, and left the house. Unable to grasp what had just happened, I was left standing there, stunned. A week later, I attended my high school reunion. I wasn't in the mood, but I had already paid the fee, and since I hadn't been in touch with James since then and had been feeling frustrated every day, I thought it might be a good distraction. There, I saw that some classmates were divorced or single mothers, yet they all lived strongly. I had always hoped for improvement in my relationship with James, but on reflection, if we reconciled, I would have to follow him to his new job location. Considering the daily commute, even if it was to a neighboring state, it would be impossible to stay at my current job. And since I had worked for 17 years since junior college and received a decent salary, it would be nearly impossible to earn an equivalent income in the new place. Since James had completely rejected me, I started to think maybe it was better to give up. What made my decision final was a call from James hurrying me to move out. We had been living in a rented apartment, and James was the tenant. The renewal period was coming up, and the real estate agent had contacted James. I told them we'd move out in a month, so dispose of everything by then. You didn't consult me at all, even though I still live here. When I complained, the lease is in my name. I don't need to discuss it with you, he said aggressively. Realizing it was hopeless, I replied, all right. Then I'll take care of my stuff this weekend or the next. Not just your stuff. Throw out everything that's left in my room and the furniture, too. What? I snapped at that. What are you saying? You rented this place when you were single, and most of the furniture has been here since then. Most of the rest, like the appliances, were bought with your credit card. I'll dispose of the furniture and appliances I mainly used, but of course, you are responsible for the rest. After I said that, I hung up. What a petty man, taking only what's important to him and leaving the rest for me to handle. That's when I firmly decided to go through with the divorce. Over the weekend, while organizing the closet, I found myself reminiscing about the many things that have happened since we got married, such happy memories from the past. Among the items, of course, were my own, but there were also many belonging to James. Then, I came across his high school yearbook from his teenage years. I realized that the friends James introduced me to were all from after his university days as I absent-mindedly flipped through his yearbook. That's when I noticed something unexpected. I submitted the divorce papers and reported it to James by text messages. Then, a week later at night, James replied with a picture, but to my astonishment, it was a marriage certificate with another woman. Staring at it in disbelief, James called me. "Did you see it? What does this mean?" "Just what it looks like. I just had a wedding and remarried her." "No way. She's super beautiful, rich, and has a great personality. I was told by such a wonderful woman that she wanted to marry me right after I divorced you." "That's the proof. Cool, right? So, you were cheating on me while we were married? Unlike you, who has nothing but your job, I'm a popular guy." "Oh, and her father is building us a house on his property, and thanks to his connections, I got a job in her hometown. It's a mid-sized company, but I'm treated like an executive." He seemed eager to brag about remarrying his wealthy mistress, and James's nonchalant response sparked a fury in me. To think he divorced me claiming I was the problem, only to remarry his affair partner. He mentioned they had been seeing each other for over 2 years. They met at a pub he went to with coworkers, where she was one of 4 female patrons at a neighboring table. Apparently, she caught his attention when she helped him clean up his drink that he had accidentally spilled on himself. "Man, she's the same age as you and me, but she looked incredibly beautiful, at least 10 years younger." She quickly wiped down my shirt with her pretty handkerchief. According to James, he took her to a restaurant to say thanks and got to chatting, and it turns out she's a landowner's daughter. She was in an arranged marriage, suggested by her parents, and was having troubles because her husband was cheating on her. She said something like, "If there's something wrong with me, I have to fix it, which is nothing like you." That really got to me. He pursued her aggressively, and they started dating even though she was still married. Isn't it normal to wonder why she juggled both men? But love-struck James was oblivious. "A woman's got to support her man, not prioritize work over him like you did. You weren't right for me." "What? You mean you can't stand up for yourself?" I snapped back, and he retorted, "Great, I'm glad I'm rid of a woman like you. Vivian's the best." "Vivian? That's her name?" I remembered something about that name. "You really married her?" "No kidding?" I taunted him, hitting a nerve. "She's from a great family and has the best personality. Look at this elegant beauty," he boasted, sending me their wedding picture just as I expected. Yep, that was her. I couldn't help but burst into laughter. "What's so funny?" "It's proof we're married." "Sure, it's real." I was so amused that I was beyond words. "Stop laughing. We're married, and she's carrying my child." "What? No way." I laughed uncontrollably. "Ah, I get it, you've gone crazy from the shock of losing me." James interpreted my continued laughter in a way that flattered himself. "In 3 months, we're having a girl. She's bound to be a beauty, just like Vivian," he said, absolutely smitten. "Well, even if she looks like you, she'll be pretty," I said, since James has the sweet looks of an idol. He seemed a bit flustered for some reason and hurriedly said, "No, I mean, it's okay, if she doesn't look like me." Hearing that, I burst out laughing again. James snapped, "Go nuts on your own time then," and hung up the phone. He'd understand why I laughed eventually. I looked forward to that. Later, we had some disputes over alimony and property division, but through lawyers, I managed to get a hefty sum from James. Vivian's share of the compensation was also paid by him, not wanting to stress her during pregnancy. After a long silence, 2 years later, I received a desperate message from him. "Please, Karen, I need to talk." Reluctantly, I answered the phone call that followed the message. As I expected, it was about the child he had with Vivian. The kid should look like us, right? Of course, who else would she look like? Yeah, right. Apparently, their 2-year-old daughter didn't resemble the beautiful Vivian at all. She's only about 2, right? She'll change a lot as she grows. I tried to suggest this, but he didn't seem convinced, expecting at least a passing resemblance by now. Well, that's to be expected. James, does she look like you? I asked, stifling laughter. No, she doesn't look like me. But that's okay. It's fine if she doesn't resemble me. Suddenly, he became flustered and raised his voice. He suspected Vivian of cheating and secretly did a DNA test. The results confirmed that the child was indeed related to both James and Vivian. So, she's definitely your kid. I tried to end the conversation there, but James persisted. Hey, when I told you 2 years ago over the phone that Vivian was pregnant, you laughed a lot. Do you know something? He was sharp to remember that. Well, maybe. Actually, Vivian was from the same high school as me and we were in the same year. We were in different classes for 3 years, so I didn't know much about her, but she was definitely a landowner's daughter, known to be haughty and of a nasty character. About 2 years ago at a class reunion, she became a topic of conversation, and the topic was cosmetic surgery. Vivian used to be concerned about her single eyelids, small eyes, button nose, and slightly receding chin, and after graduating high school, she went all the way to New York to have her face redone several times at a renowned clinic. I didn't get to see her at the reunion, but later a friend sent me before and after photos of Vivian's surgery. The level of cosmetic surgery in the US is really something. When I told this to James, of course, he didn't believe it at first, but then he realized he had never seen any childhood or yearbook photos from her, and was shocked. Was I being deceived? Damn it. All the while, she had this innocent look on her face, but in reality, she was the one who cheated several times before our relationship and got divorced. And I'm the one getting demands for alimony from several wives. I'm gonna confront Vivian. Maybe you shouldn't do that? Why not? Because, don't you think your daughter doesn't look like you at all? Normally, it's said that girls tend to resemble their fathers. At that, James was at a loss for words. She doesn't look like you, of course. Because you had cosmetic surgery too. How did you? When I moved out of our apartment 2 years ago, I found your high school yearbook. You were a completely different person. I was so surprised. Seeing that album, I understood why he had never introduced any friends from before university to me, why he insisted on a simple wedding with just a few colleagues from work invited. Probably, James had cosmetic surgery in university and was afraid of being exposed by his friends from that time. I don't think cosmetic surgery is bad at all, but children will resemble their original faces, so you should think it through. What should I do now? What to do? Just be a normal dad. The results are in, no doubt it's your child. With that, I hung up, blocked his number. He's really a narrow-minded man, unhappy because his child doesn't look the way he wanted. When a friend of mine, who has a child of the same age as Vivian's kid a year from now, showed me a picture of their child at the start of kindergarten, it was just adorable. It's simply that the kid doesn't resemble the current Vivian or James. However, according to my friend who has become a mom friend of Vivian, she was hoping her child would look like the post-surgery James. My friend is tired of hearing her complain every day, I shouldn't have had such a child. They really are the worst kind of couple, alike in the worst ways. And it seems James has cheated again, and my friend is now being consulted by Vivian for divorce advice. Silly James. If he ends up divorcing Vivian, he'll have to pay alimony and child support. And since Vivian is a rich girl, if she hires a competent lawyer, who knows how much she'll fleece him for. Moreover, according to a friend of mine who's become a mom friend of Vivian, Vivian's plastic surgery is known even to the local kids, and I hear her daughter is being ostracized at kindergarten with comments like, "Your mom was ugly before, huh?" It's a relief that Vivian's parents are doting on her, but it's truly pitiable for the child. Well, it's none of my business. I managed to rent an apartment in a convenient location for commuting. Being closer, I can do the cleaning and laundry after getting home, and on my days off, I can spend the whole day on myself. I've deepened my friendship with a divorced classmate I reconnected with at the reunion, and I'm living a leisurely, enjoyable life. My husband and I, both divorcees, tied the knot 6 years ago. My stepdaughter, a high school junior, is from his first marriage, and my younger daughter is from my previous marriage. Only our youngest is the child we share together, a somewhat complex family setup. But the eldest girl is the spitting image of her dad, and the middle child mirrors me, so outsiders rarely catch on to our blended situation. He ended his previous marriage because his ex-wife cheated. I also ended my previous marriage over infidelity, so I have no tolerance for cheaters. We worked at the same company, where he fell hard for me and pursued me until I agreed to date him. But I was clueless about his kid at home, though I knew he was divorced. He later admitted he kept it under wraps to make sure I'd date him. When I found out, it bothered me. Why hide your child? However, by that time, I was already deeply in love with him, and there was no going back. My daughter also grew quite fond of him. He often visited my apartment, looked after my daughter, and played with her. He was nothing like my ex-husband. Because of that, my daughter, who had been cautious at first, grew to be very fond of him and smoothly accepted our remarriage. But it was different for my stepdaughter. Her own father goes away without her, even on his days off. And he often didn't come back from my apartment even during the weekdays. She was just in elementary school and must have felt lonely. Even when my daughter and I became part of her life, she didn't accept us at all. She made it clear with hostility, "I'm never going to call you Mom." I realized this too late, and there was nothing I could do about it. If my husband hadn't kept it a secret and had spent that time with her, maybe things would have been different. My stepdaughter was very attached to her grandmother, who took care of her every day. I stumbled right out of the gate with her. After getting remarried, we started our new life living with my husband's mother. That's because he had been living with her, letting her take care of his daughter. My stepdaughter absolutely refused to leave her grandmother, and her biological grandfather had passed away years ago. My husband was concerned about leaving his mother alone, so my daughter and I moved into his family home. Not long after, I gave birth to our youngest daughter, but unlike with my middle child, he didn't give her the same attention. He was rather indifferent, and even when I tried to engage him, he'd just give half-hearted responses while glued to his smartphone games. He even began to neglect my daughter, who had grown so fond of him, and he became distant with me as if he had lost interest. It's like the saying, "Don't feed the fish once you've caught them." My relationship with my stepdaughter remained strained. She would confrontationally say, "We're not related by blood. You're not my mom or anything." My efforts to get closer only seemed to make things worse. My middle child was always nervous around her stepsister, constantly scared. My mother-in-law was deferential toward her granddaughter and hardly did anything for my youngest, clearly differentiating her from my daughter, who isn't biologically related to my husband. She would only give treats and toys to my stepdaughter, never to my middle child. Sometimes, she would give the unwanted treats to the baby, who was too young to eat them anyway. Instead, I gave the sweets to my middle daughter, and when she tried to eat them, my mother-in-law snapped, "Are you planning to steal what was given to someone else?" How greedy. It's much harder and more painful for me to see my children being treated like this than being bullied myself. When I talk to my husband about it, he dismisses it with, "Well, she's not my kid, so it can't be helped. Don't worry about it." Are you serious? We're a family now, the kids should be treated equally. I was shocked by my husband's words, but he was serious. "Well, that's just lip service, it's impossible," he said nonchalantly. I felt like I no longer understood my husband, and this was the beginning of a gradual deterioration in our relationship. I should have known from the way he dealt with his daughter at the start. He had said he divorced his ex-wife because of her infidelity, but there must be a problem with him as well. Whether it's a personality clash or something fundamental, I just can't understand him. Our relationship became so strained that one day, he almost stopped coming home altogether. My eldest daughter laughed triumphantly, "Dad's got a new woman. You're going to be dumped too." Yet, she seemed hurt herself. I retorted, "That can't be true," but I had a premonition. My love for my husband was completely gone. I hate men who cheat. I started to prepare for a divorce quietly, looking for an apartment and contacting the lawyer I had used for my divorce from my first husband. And as I suspected, my eldest daughter's prediction came true. My husband said, my affair partner is pregnant. I want a divorce. On a Sunday, with all of us, including my mother-in-law, gathered in the living room. I replied, okay, I understand. I'll take the middle and youngest daughters with me. We can discuss alimony and child support through lawyers. My mother-in-law watched silently. I had already talked to the middle and youngest daughters about the possibility of divorce, and they anxiously looked back and forth between me and my husband. All right. I have preparations to make too, so I'd like you to move out of the house soon. My husband was relieved that I agreed so easily and insensitively suggested I leave quickly. It irritated me, but I had to hold back. I couldn't understand him at all, and I didn't even want to anymore. Getting alimony and child support and cutting ties quickly seemed like the best way to clear my head. That's when my eldest daughter suddenly said, I want to go with you, Mom. I was dumbfounded. Our relationship had been terrible all along. I couldn't understand her feelings. What? That's not possible. We're not related by blood, remember? You've been telling me that for years, haven't you? My mother-in-law, also surprised, asked, why don't you want to live with your grandma? But my husband had a different take. Oh, that's perfect. See, my next wife, she doesn't want any stepchildren, so she's saying to kick everyone out. But she says my mom can stay as the nanny. His appalling statement was shocking, but it seems his affair partner is of the same low character. Just keep quiet for a moment. Why do you want to come with me now? You've never called me a mom for the past 6 years, why start now? Why say you want to come with me? I couldn't help but press her for answers. Because, the food you make is delicious, and you do the cleaning and laundry. Her voice trailed off. So, you just want someone to take care of you? It's not because you like us or want to be with us, right? Come on, just take her with you too. It won't make a difference if there's one more. Keep out of this since you can't understand this situation. And you. She's your child. Why are you trying to push her onto me, a complete stranger, after we divorce? Why don't you want to live with your grandma? My mother-in-law looked like she was about to cry, shocked by the rejection from her beloved granddaughter. I had never seen her so vulnerable. Because, Grandma's been complaining about her back pain lately and doesn't do anything. If Mom leaves, I'll have to help with the chores, right? I'm appalled. It's all just for your own benefit. You're ready to easily discard the grandma who's loved and taken care of you just because she's no longer useful. You're just like your father. Too selfish. I don't like my mother-in-law. The eldest daughter, who never warmed up to me and was always sassy. I really couldn't imagine taking her with me. You're 16 now. Can't you figure out for yourself why I might not want to take you with me? I let my emotions get the best of me and snapped back at her. I can't forget the sad look on her face. Though we agreed on the divorce, I didn't trust my husband at all, so I hired a lawyer. To ensure everything was legally documented, I filed for divorce mediation and sought alimony from the affair partner. Despite some disputes over the amount of alimony and child support, the divorce was finalized almost entirely on my terms. The eldest daughter stayed in her room even on the day we left. It would be a lie to say I didn't care, but it was impossible. With that last concern, the life with just me, the middle daughter, and the youngest began. The new life was surprisingly fun. The middle and youngest daughters helped out willingly, and there were no fights since the eldest daughter, my husband, and my mother-in-law were gone. We started to forget about the eldest daughter as we led a stress-free and busy but happy life. Then, 3 years later, the eldest daughter contacted me wanting to meet, which I hadn't blocked because I thought she wouldn't contact me. Although I didn't want anything to do with my husband's family anymore, she insisted she needed to apologize, so I agreed to see her. Mom, I'm sorry for everything. I understand now. I was really a terrible child, she apologized as soon as we met. I was taking my anger out on you. I was sad because I thought you took my dad away. But I realized it wasn't you who was wrong, it was my dad. The new wife openly mistreated her and constantly told her to get out. Of course, the eldest daughter fought back. Unlike me, the new wife refused to do anything for her, saying, "Why should I have to take care of you?" The eldest was shocked as she had expected, even with bad relationship, basic care like meals and laundry. My ex-husband ignored it all. I thought my mother-in-law would defend her, but she didn't, unlike with me. The reason was simple. The affair partner, who had a terrible personality, wanted the stepchild out. She was tough, openly rude to my mother-in-law, and even threatened her. She threw things when she was in a bad mood. My mother-in-law prioritized her own safety. My ex-husband tried to escape when he realized what was happening, but the affair partner didn't let him, and he was severely punished. I also started college and living on my own. I never knew household chores could be so hard. She seems to have juggled studying for college entrance exams with unfamiliar household chores. She somehow got into college, and in leaving home as if to escape, she began to live on her own and came to appreciate what I had done for her. For 6 years, despite being rejected by her, I worked hard to be her mother. I would wake up at 4 a.m. to make cute lunches for her field trips and dragged my reluctant husband to parent-teacher conferences and other school events. I was really thankful to you, Mom. But I just couldn't express it. When she learned she wouldn't be coming with me and was bullied by my husband's new wife, she realized just how much she had been cared for by me. My mother-in-law would spoil her whimsically but never engaged with her seriously. The fact that she didn't protect her from my husband's affair partner is proof of that. Our family ties may have been cut, but my efforts weren't in vain. Despite not being sure if I would forgive her, she reached out to apologize. The middle and youngest daughters were also happy to see their eldest sister after such a long time, and I'm glad they met. Interestingly, it was the middle daughter who was the happiest about the reunion. Despite being treated poorly, my middle daughter seemed to really like her older sister. She told me about times when she was taught by her, or when they played together, all of which happened out of my sight. Speaking of my ex-husband, it seems he's suffering terribly from several STDs after their long incubation periods, perhaps a consequence of his philandering. He and his affair partner are now pointing fingers at each other. I got tested as a precaution after hearing this from my daughter, and I'm relieved to be negative. My mother-in-law ended up being burdened with raising her sons and his affair partner's child instead. Unlike with when we had a daughter, my mother-in-law is now elderly. She's exhausted every day. Well, it's her own doing, so it can't be helped. Ironically, I now have the best relationship with my eldest. I've been bothered about pushing her away for so long, so it feels good to be clear of that regret. I think we've finally grasped perfect happiness. An unmarked white envelope addressed to me. That was the start of everything. I'm Sarah, almost hitting 60. I divorced my husband 15 years ago because of his affair. Since then, I've been living alone, but for the past year, I've been living with my second son and his girlfriend, Daisy. My eldest son, Tom, now 35, lives in an apartment near his workplace. I was living a peaceful life, working part-time until one day, this envelope without a sender, crudely marked with my address and name, arrived. Inside was a bill from a hotel. What's this? Upon closer inspection, I found that the bill was not addressed to me, but to my eldest son, Tom, and it appeared to be a bill for the wedding and reception expenses. The date was about 2 weeks ago. What does this mean? Did Tom get married? Indeed, Tom had a girlfriend I met just once a few months ago. But at that time, there was no talk of marriage, and frankly, I didn't have a great impression of the woman. Her name was Michelle, I believe, and she barely made eye contact and kept saying, and oh. As if displeased with something. Could it be that Tom married her? I hurriedly called Tom, but he didn't answer, possibly because he was at work. I tried to leave a message on the landline phone of the apartment where my son lives alone, and a woman answered. It was Michelle. Upon realizing the call was from me, she said with utter annoyance, "Ugh. This is why I told Tom to get rid of this landline. What does this mean? Did you two get married? Are you living together there?" I bombarded her with questions, to which Michelle responded in a robotic tone. "We got married, we're living together." So what? So what? I received a bill from the hotel. I didn't hear a word about a wedding. Oh, it arrived already? I sent that because I was hoping you would pay. Michelle answered nonchalantly. We chose a venue where we could pay later. We paid the deposit, But we thought you should handle the rest. What? They had a wedding without even inviting me, and now they expect me to pay? I was utterly speechless. Michelle, sounding irritated but clear, said, Tom insisted on marrying me. I found the whole mother-in-law thing too bothersome and refused many times. So naturally, you should be the one to pay. If you refuse, do you realize Tom will be buried in debt? Hearing her cold voice snapped me back to reality. What does Tom say about this? He says it's fine, of course. By the way, don't bother trying to contact him. I made sure your number is blocked. So that's why I couldn't get through earlier. I might as well tell you now. Other than for weddings, funerals, and such, please don't contact us at all. And even for those, we refuse anything that costs money. Wait, just wait a minute. Why are you avoiding me so much? It's obvious, isn't it? A mother-in-law is nothing but a thorn in the eye. Besides, you're poor after your divorce, right? We can't have you begging us for money. While I was panicking, I was also furious and retorted. If you think I'm so poor, why the heck are you sending me this bill? That's a separate issue. Please make sure to pay it. With that, Michelle hung up abruptly. I stood there holding the receiver, completely stunned. Mom? It was my second son, Jack's voice, that brought me back to my senses. It seemed hours had passed since that phone call, and I was standing in a dark room. Tears overflowed as I explained everything to Jack. He hadn't heard a word about the marriage from Tom and was now fuming with anger. That's impossible. I mean, that wife of his, she seems like a woman of bad character, doesn't she? I thought she'd be a good match for my brother. That's right, Tom, who was spoiled by my late mother-in-law, looked down on me since he was a child. By middle school, he was calling me old hag and a worthless, and together with my mother-in-law and ex-husband, he kept on treating me horribly. Jack was the one who always stood up for me. After my divorce, I had been living alone for a long time. Thinking I might be lonely, my kind son invited me to move in with him and his girlfriend, Daisy. What should I do with this bill? It's over $20,000. I could pay it with the alimony from my ex-husband, but I honestly don't want to use that money. I was thinking of saving it for your and Daisy's wedding or for when you have kids. Both my second son and his girlfriend, Daisy, have always been very kind to me. So, I had decided to use all the alimony and property settlement money, which my stingy ex-husband had scrimped and saved, for these two. Then my son said, "That money is yours, Mom. You don't have to use it for us. And it's even more unthinkable to use it for my brother." He took the bill from me. "I'll throw this away at work." Mom, you remember what my brother has done to you, right? You absolutely must not pay this. Even if my eldest son was awful, I was the one who bore him. So if I had the bill, I would definitely end up paying it. Jack knew that. Honestly, I was relieved. 2 weeks later, Michelle called me. "Hey. Why haven't you paid yet?" "The venue just called me because the payment deadline has passed." "That? I've discussed it with my second son, and we've decided there's no need to pay. Besides, can't you handle it with the cash gifts from the wedding?" I managed to say what I wanted to, though my heart was pounding. Then Michelle flew into a rage. "We've moved, and we've already spent all the cash gifts. What are you going to do about this?" "What? You moved? Where to?" "Shut up. It doesn't matter where. This woman truly wants nothing to do with me." Realizing this, I made up my mind. And said, "All right, I'll make a counteroffer. I'll give you $10,000, and in exchange, we part ways. No contact, not even for weddings or funerals, we live as if the other does not exist. How about that?" But Michelle wasn't satisfied. $10,000 is not enough. I need at least $20,000. What are you thinking? Not inviting me to the wedding, not telling me where you've moved to, and still asking for $20,000? I don't care. You only have about 20 years left to live anyway. We're going to live twice as long as you, so I might as well want all your money. That's just cruel. Well, we're going to get that $20,000 from you one way or another. Once you pay, as per your wish, well, cut ties with you. I didn't want anything to do with this woman anymore. So, I agreed to her conditions. Jack would probably be angry if he knew. But I didn't want to be troubled by Tom and his wife anymore. A year later, Jack married Daisy. They were about to set up a new home, and though I was planning to live alone, they both asked me to live with them. So, I gave them not only a wedding gift but also prepaid 2 years' rent for their new place and some money to help with their mortgage. Then Michelle called again. Tom's brother and his wife are building a house, aren't they? You helped them, right? Because of you, Tom is working 2 jobs and is exhausted since you only gave us a mere $20,000. It seems she heard about our new living situation somewhere. I was dumbfounded. But you agreed to that back then. I can't change it now. Shut up. We're having a baby, what are you going to do about that? Oh, really? Congratulations. But remember, we agreed to cut all ties, no matter what. So, I'm not going to give you a penny. No matter what she said, I had decided not to get involved anymore and stood my ground. You think you're so high and mighty. Even if your grandchild is born, I won't let you see them. You'll regret it. And with that, Michelle hung up. Apparently, she thinks a grandchild is the ultimate trump card to control a mother-in-law. I would love to have a grandchild. But I'm already about to have one, actually, twins, a boy and a girl. Daisy is 8 months pregnant. I'm sorry, but I'm not interested in Tom's child at all. Half a year later, Daisy gave birth safely, and I was busily but happily caring for the twins. That's when I got an email with a photo from my eldest son, Tom. It seemed that Michelle had also given birth, and the photo showed a lovely baby with Michelle and Tom. But since we had already cut ties, it was none of my concern. When I kept ignoring it, Michelle called me, seemingly out of numbness. Did you see the picture? Isn't it incredibly cute? Yes, it is. So, what do you want? Don't talk like that. I went out of my way to show you your grandchild. And? It's your eldest grandson. You could at least send a congratulatory gift. What? I thought we agreed no contact except for weddings, funerals, and such. Well, yes, that was the agreement, but normally a parent would send a congratulatory gift or something. I knew it would come to this. No, I'm sticking to the agreement with you, Michelle. With that said, Michelle, seeming to realize it was futile, handed the phone to Tom. That's the deal between you and Michelle, right? It's got nothing to do with me. Send me the celebratory money. He's always been good at twisting logic. It's your eldest grandson, you know? Don't you think you should take care of him? According to Tom, how they treat their grandchild will determine how I'm treated in my old age. I really don't need you to worry about my old age. Huh, you think you can rely on Jack, huh? With 2 kids of his own, do you really think he can take care of you in your old age? I'm not planning to rely on Jack and his family. So, what are you going to do? I know you didn't get much from Dad's alimony. Wouldn't it be better to cozy up to us now? With an air of triumph, Tom said that. To him, I replied. Like I said, I'll be fine. I've been paying into a personal pension insurance since I was single. It's an old policy, so the rates are good, and I get about $800 every month starting this year. Plus, I've worked long enough to get about $800 in government pension too. I can live on both combined. After hearing that, Tom seemed to be in shock. There was silence for a while before he sputtered, but that will be just enough if nothing happens. When you get older and your body breaks down, you'll come crawling to us for help. Then, laughing, I answered. Don't worry. I canceled the life insurance where you were the beneficiary. I had taken out life insurance policies for Tom and Jack when they were born, with each of them as the beneficiary. I had canceled Tom's to pay off that $20,000. There's plenty of money from the cancellation, so don't worry. Cancellation? Are you serious? Pity, isn't it? If I hadn't canceled it, you would have gotten about $100,000 when I pass away. No way. If you're going to blame someone, blame Michelle. She was the one who said to get the $20,000 from me by any means necessary. Actually, the cancellation refund was only about $50,000, so I had about $30,000 left, not as much as to shock Tom, but there was no obligation to tell him the exact amount. Pleased with the silent shock on Tom's end, I hung up the phone. Afterward, it seemed Tom and Michelle had a huge fight. There's talk of divorce, but discussions about alimony and child support are at a stalemate, and they're in a state of living separately within the same house. It's like seeing the end of someone obsessed with money. As for me, I started working part-time as a cleaner to ensure I don't burden Jack and his family financially during my retirement. Warmly welcomed by my son and his wife and with 2 grandchildren, I am truly happy now. A family that runs a major restaurant group. That was my husband's family. To my mother-in-law, who has a husband designated as the next head of the family, that status shined brighter than anything, and I, raised by a single father, seemed to be nothing but a stain on their family. To her, a daughter-in-law whose family and husband's status were beneath her own was a trivial existence that deserved to be ignored. However, the situation changed drastically when my design was chosen for the menu of the restaurant managed by my father-in-law. My mother-in-law had studied design a bit, but it seems she was eliminated in the first round of the selection process. It's just a lousy thing I scribbled. She would say in sour grapes, but to hold such a thing against the work of a professional designer and to harbor resentment? After that, her behavior towards me, the one-parent-raised woman, shifted from ignoring me to outright mistreatment, and she would come to our separate house where my husband James and I lived to spout sarcasm and nag. "Ava, dear. The dust behind the TV hasn't been cleaned at all. What kind of upbringing leads to satisfaction with such cleaning?" My mother-in-law would start finding fault as soon as she arrived, loudly pointing things out. "That was actually me." My husband would reply, clearly disheartened. Since my husband was working from home and he was naturally helpful with housework, the chores had inadvertently become his burden. It was a complete boomerang back to my mother-in-law, questioning what kind of upbringing she gave. "Ava, dear. Are you pushing housework onto your husband again? What kind of wife does that? Neglecting chores because you prioritize work." I never slacked off at work or at home. She'd shift the blame onto something else. Even if my husband tried to stop her, my mother-in-law wouldn't quit until I apologized. "I'm really sorry. I'll try harder." Every time I said this and bowed, my mother-in-law would leave our place with a smug grin, satisfied. My husband always sighed at his mother's attitude. "I'm sorry, I'll take on more of the chores." No, it's clearly Mom's sarcasm. "I'm sorry for not being more supportive," he would say, always defending me, but his mother never took his words to heart. He had talked to his father about it, but the lack of any change in her behavior suggested that his father, busy with managing the business, probably forgot to follow up. Well, I just have to put up with my mother-in-law's ill-made sarcasm and so on. I thought as people aged, they would become more easygoing. But I never imagined she would pull something like this. My husband's cousin got engaged, and a celebration was set up. Apparently, they were inviting people from work, not just family, and they had rented out a hall in a fancy hotel that could accommodate 70 people for a grand celebration. The day after my husband informed me, I received a call from my mother-in-law. The celebration is a traditional event, so we'll leave some of the dishes to the venue, but family members will prepare the main dishes. We're assigning tasks for each type of dish. And I have a proposal, Ava. You used to brag about being good at cooking, right? Her tone was sarcastic, but I did remember saying once that I was good at cooking because I used to help my dad since I was little. If it turns out bad, you'll be the one embarrassed later, but that's fine. Please take care of the Japanese cuisine. Before I could respond, she had already made up her mind and ended the call. Well, that's typical, I thought, and began adjusting my work schedule for the day of the event and started selecting the Japanese cuisine menu. Everything went smoothly until the day of the celebration. In hindsight, it was just the calm before the storm. On the day of the engagement party, my mother-in-law called me on my cell phone. It was 11:30 a.m. The event was supposed to start at 1 p.m., so as the head coordinator, my mother-in-law should have been busy with the final venue check, right? Feeling puzzled, I answered. "Oh, Ava, dear. I checked the dishes you prepared, and such terrible cooking, please discard it." I was so shocked, I threw it all away. "What? Caught off guard by her high-pitched chatter, I couldn't grasp the situation and gave a half-hearted reply. I'm sorry, I'm at the office right now. I'm in the middle of work. I was rushing through an urgent job so I could make it to the celebration on time. Humph, you're so shocked you can't even speak. There's no time, it starts at 1. Hurry up and remake it. I was at a loss, we were not on the same page. Could it be that she didn't know I had swapped my duty for today? As I started to realize what might be happening, a dreadful thought came to mind. Calm down, me. What did my mother-in-law just say? She threw away the dishes. In fact, a few days after I was assigned to the Japanese cuisine, I had to swap tasks with someone in charge of sending out invitations due to unforeseen circumstances. I hadn't been concerned about contacting my mother-in-law, the event coordinator, because the lady, a person who swapped tasks with me, said she would call my mother-in-law. Listen carefully, mother-in-law. I'm at the office right now, have been all morning. I was removed from cooking duty, so I was catching up on work during the freed-up time. I explained slowly. Then whose cooking is this? She mumbled, then I heard her gasp sharply. What are we going to do? There's only an hour left until the start. This is your responsibility. You didn't report the change. That's it. You'll take care of it. Otherwise, I'll say you threw it away. My mother-in-law was panicking so much, she was spouting nonsense. But I didn't want her going around saying I had tossed the food. Reluctantly, I apologized and excused myself from the office and rushed to the venue. I just missed the train and arrived a little past noon. I had explained the situation to my husband via text, so as soon as he saw me, he rushed over. He was looking pale. I'm too late. The food was in the green room, but there was an uproar because the Japanese cuisine was missing. When I went to the kitchen, the sink was clogged with food. It felt like a crime scene with a tense atmosphere. Ava threw it away. Her absence is proof enough. My mother-in-law had apparently accused me. I was holding back a headache. I need to get to the scene. I told my husband, and at the same time, I entrusted him with a request. As soon as I arrived in the kitchen, my sharp-eyed mother-in-law spotted me. Ava. What have you done? She yelled. My husband's aunts, his cousin, the one engaged, and the fiancée, Emily, along with other relatives who heard the commotion, were there. They all turned their accusing eyes on me, but I corrected them calmly. I did not throw away the food. Don't play dumb. Doing something like this, ruining a celebration. Someone ungrateful like you is a disgrace to our family. My mother-in-law immediately shrieked. I was working all morning. You called me, saying the food was thrown away, didn't you? What? This daughter-in-law always looks down on me, and now she's trying to pin such a terrible crime on me. She cried out, playing the victim to the surrounding crowd. To my disadvantage, the relatives seemed to trust my mother-in-law, who had been in the family for over 20 years, more than me, who had only been part of the family for a few. I felt their condemning eyes on me again. Should I call the office then, to prove I was working all morning? If I did that, her lie would eventually be exposed. I was determined to fight this out. There's no need for that. Ava was handling a task for me. It was last-minute work, but she graciously accepted it. The owner of the unexpected voice was my father-in-law. With my husband standing behind him, relief on his face. I was worried he'd be too busy to respond, but my husband had successfully reached out to him. The trust as the head of the main family was evident. The gazes on me shifted awkwardly, and suspicion began to gather on my mother-in-law. So, Ava. About that call earlier. Mother-in-law said she tasted the food and it was so bad she threw it all away. She told me over the phone to remake it. I recounted. The room buzzed with my testimony. And then a sobbing sound rose above it. It was Emily, the fiancée. I mostly cook Western food, but I worked hard on the Japanese dishes too, and they turned out delicious. She sobbed, clinging to her fiancé. Yes, she was the one who had swapped tasks with me. She was the main character of this event, but she wanted everyone to taste her cooking as a surprise plan, so I agreed to help her. She had said to keep it a secret, but I never expected Emily's dishes to be kept a secret even from my mother-in-law, the event coordinator. Emily's cooking is terrible. That means my taste is in question too since I hired her for our Italian restaurant, my father-in-law mused. No. That's not it. I didn't mean that, and my mother-in-law retorted in panic. But it was too late to deny it now. Emily is a chef at my father-in-law's Italian restaurant. Even though it was Japanese cuisine, it was made by a professional. Moreover, the person in question had the endorsement of my father-in-law. Your tongue must have soured from all the snide remarks to your daughter-in-law, my father-in-law sighed with sarcasm. With sarcasm laced in his sigh, my father-in-law looked on. My mother-in-law clung to him, apologizing profusely. Aren't you apologizing to the wrong person? It's terrible to throw away Emily's cooking, no matter how bad you thought it was. I couldn't hold back and said. My mother-in-law's face twisted in anger as she grabbed me by the collar. I thought it was your cooking, that a dish made by someone raised by a single parent would be tasteless and poor, so I kindly threw it away. If I had known it was someone else's, I would have never done that. It's all your fault. You must have set me for this. She ranted, spitting as she yelled. Amid her disgrace, my husband's aunt raised her voice with a frown. Knowing that I'm divorced, do you imply that being raised by a single parent is shameful? Our late grandmother also lost her mother when she was young. By your logic, it seems our family would be full of a shameful people. She said. Her gaze cold as if looking at a bug. No, that's not it. I didn't know, my mother-in-law protested. It doesn't matter. We've seen your true nature, my husband's aunt dismissed her. Shivering, my mother-in-law collapsed onto the cold floor of the kitchen. What a commotion, came a voice unexpectedly. I turned to see an old man in a wheelchair. It was my husband's grandfather, the current patriarch of the main family. I heard such a ruckus. I don't quite understand the situation, but throwing away food is unacceptable. He nodded gravely. The late grandmother used to share a story of receiving sweet potatoes from a field while evacuating. The sweetness momentarily took away the pain of losing her mother. He recalled, and silence enveloped the room. Food carries the emotions of the people who make it. Grandmother always said she was saved by the kindness of the cook. To waste food is to be less than human. We don't have such people in our family, do we? He directed the question at my father-in-law. Absolutely not. My father-in-law responded, and the patriarch left, content with the answer. The patriarch's words are law. At least to everyone's eyes, the divorce my father-in-law decided for my mother-in-law seemed like the proper course of action. My mother-in-law, who had once boasted about being the wife of the future head of the main family, knew all too well the strength of the patriarch's authority, understanding that no appeal would overturn his word. She had to go around apologizing to all the relatives, including those from the branch families, not only for the disruption at the celebration but also for the disrespect against food, which was particularly shameful for a family involved in the food business. She ended up kneeling and sobbing. Regarding the divorce settlement, after deducting a compensation for ruining the celebration, it was agreed to give her a modest sum for her future setup. Cast out of the main house, she ended up in a small apartment meant for singles. Shunned by all relatives and without anyone to turn to, she began a lonely life. She never would have imagined that her petty jealousy and mistreatment of her daughter-in-law, leading to throwing away the food, would result in such a downfall. My mother-in-law had committed an act that a person should never do. She received the consequences of her actions.